Hello. Right, getting off the ground with the creative. I recommended some publications, Key Concepts, Pictures on a Page, and The Nature of Photographs, in order to get the creative side of your ambitions going, and also to start to amass your knowledge, to start to understand or look at photographs and start to see understand the language of photography, I suppose. That's a good way of putting it. But what I was struck by was that obviously perhaps sometimes it's not easy. I looked at some reviews on some books, in particular I looked at some reviews by a photographer, exceptional photographer called Jane Bown. And what I realised was really a lot of books don't actually sort of guide you into what you're looking for if you're aspiring to visually learn from them. I mean, they tell you, oh, it's a nice book, or it's got great photographs or famous people in it. So I thought it would be useful just to run through a couple of things that I think about when I'm reading books by photographers that I aspire to or whose work I admire. So typically, as I use Jane Bown as an example, as a good starting point, as somebody that had debatably a simplistic approach to her work, and yet obviously it was a complex knowledge that she had. So I just thought that it would be worth just highlighting a few things. So for example, in the introduction, Jane talks about how, and I'll just read a little bit here, my methods of working are straightforward and practical, developed over 50 years of working as a newspaper photographer. I use simple equipment and no tricks. For my first 15 years with the Observer, I used a Rolleiflex camera with a beautiful Tezza 2.5 lens. I liked the 2¼ inch square format. The Rolleiflex gave me 12 shots per film. So interesting, a couple of things there. I mean, obviously what it's telling me is how simple and how straightforward her approach was, how limited she was. I mean, if you think now with digital photography and a virtually limitless amount of exposures that you've got, so she was limited to a roll of 12 exposures only, which absolutely, I mean, it really does help to focus the mind, focus the brain on composition. And she goes on to say, I used to go to assignments and take 6 or 7 or 8 photographs at most. The quality of the Rolleiflex was beautiful and absolutely pinpoint. She changed to an SLR in 1964, and that gave her the option of 2 rolls of film of 36 exposures, but she felt that was possibly too much. So, I mean, that really, when I'm reading something like this, absolutely tells me about how what information I'm getting from it is just how focused she was on what she was doing and how sure she was. So it was a confidence, it was all about a preconception. So I know that she would be looking at the light, she'd know her tools really well, and she would be able to expose and make her images. Just a couple of photographs was enough for her to know that she'd captured the moment she wanted. I also highlighted another page further on. So each one of these illustrations going through here, and there's a whole description about how she took the photographs and really what was going on in her mind. But particularly I noticed here, it talks about how she was photographing Danny DeVito in 1996 and had only 6 minutes to photograph. That's something that resonates with me. I've worked in press and I've worked at the sharp end of photography for 30 years. You often only get 5 or 10 minutes. So it really is a question of being able to pre-visualize and work quickly and to have the confidence to get the shots to actually make those images. So yeah, I mean, that was the point I also just want to make. Those are the kind of little pieces of information that I wean out of reading books like this, etc. So that's our friend there, Jane Bown. So as I say, it's a top recommend that from me as far as getting going with the creative side, and a very useful, lot of useful tips in there. And I just thought as well, Pictures on a Page, again, just a quick mention about what we get from reading a book like this. I mean, I know a little bit old-fashioned, some of these books, but the principles are still the same. For this, one chapter that always really made an impact on me was chapter 4, which talks about action. Capturing action is always something that's challenging. A lot of people just think it's necessarily about a technical thing, a fast shutter speed, and using fast films or a fast exposure and just capturing something going quickly. That is not entirely the essence of capturing action. As this chapter 4 in Pictures of a Page explains, it talks about here about the conveyance of action and how, for example, diagonals in pictures give the feeling of movement, how blur can give the feeling of movement, etc, etc. So again, I mean, that really is a very literal, straightforward description of how to achieve certain results, how to crop pictures, and possibly even how to edit them afterwards. So as I say, the point being is that I just wanted to, and I will no doubt revisit this again down the line, was just to support the young students or students in general that are just coming to look at these books for the first time and thinking, what should I be looking for? What am I trying to read? What am I trying to learn from these? I'll just give you some pointers. It's the photographer's experience. It's those little pieces of information. They tell you about, how much time they had, etc, etc. And on books like Pictures on a Page, it is the literal information about how, for example, diagonals in pictures can give the feeling of or the emotion of movement. Okay, I hope that's useful. A little bit there on just expanding on what we get from reading about our contemporaries and people that we admire. Okay, thanks very much.